For today's presentation, we're going to be discussing blue zones. So this will be an introduction. We are looking to eventually actually make this into a guided challenge. So this is being recorded right now, and this will also be distributed as well. So this is kind of like an introduction for people to just start getting their feet wet. So we'll go over a little background on blue zones. Today, we're going to go over the foods a part of the Blue Zone diet and or pattern of eating is what I should really say, and some other key functional pillars. So the Blue Zones diet per se, or eating style. Sorry, my buddy, you cannot be rolling that right now. Sorry, my cat has a little ball that's a little noisy. So it's based on the five regions that you see depicted here on the left of the slide. One is Okinawa, Japan. Another is Sardinia, located just off the coast of Italy. Then there's Icaria over in Greece. Costa Rica also has many blue zone centenarians, as well as Loma Linda in the southern portion of California. So these blue zones or these locations tend to be areas that have been deemed to hold a large amount of centenarians or individuals living past 100, but not just living past 100, but having a robust health span, not just a lifespan, right? So health span versus lifespan or longevity versus vitality, meaning that these individuals are, able to walk around, carrying the groceries, spend time with family, versus unfortunately some individuals over here in the States, of course, sometimes as we reach those later years, we don't have as much of those freedoms. So part of the Blue Zones challenge or diet or mindset is to help bring about more life, especially for us, and to get more out of our life. Blue Zones is one of those new health trends. Think of like a Blue Zones diet or eating pattern as like an enhanced Mediterranean diet, still in that family or anti-inflammatory diet per se. And then there's also a cultural preservation of traditional lifestyles involved in Blue Zones. So just a little more background on it. The concept was introduced by Dan Bettner. So he works for National Geographic. He's not a researcher, so I'm going to be completely honest there in a classic sense. But he's a researcher more from like a testimonial sense in that he had been a avid professional cyclist, traveled the world, started noticing, these different individuals, and then wanted to develop his career further after getting out of cycling to work with National Geographic and study this. So through studying these communities, they discovered common lifestyle habits that promote longevity and well-being. So you'll see a lot of common uh, things recommended. So with blue zones, for example, they note that a lot of these villages that are highlighted or areas of the world that are highlighted tend to be hill villages where people are walking up and down hill. So we know that that's, strength training. And then we know the benefits of strength training for our health and well-being and longevity. So it's not a classic research project, if that makes sense. So it's designed to capture this program that he's been, putting together over years that actually does have a really good backing and what we know is evidence-based. And our goal is to integrate these like time-tested principles into modern day life in a way that's, sustainable and achievable for us. So it also takes away the vanity aspect that gets associated with nutrition sometimes, and it makes it more purely about wellness, where the vanity piece is the side effect, though, however, for many. So you'll also see with Blue Zones, they have many different books, cookbooks. They even have this whole book here that's like a Blue Zones challenge. So that's what we'll be using to make this 1 month long challenge. Down the road, it will be a 4 week long challenge, and I'll get more to that at the end. Of course, there's more like cookbooks, and he has his own books more about his background in discovering Blue Zones. So if you're really interested in that, those are there. And then you could see this wheel here on the left. So this wheel is like their 9 main zones when it comes to blue zones. There's movement, the right outlook in life, right? Having to downshift or de-stress. And we'll go into each of these attributes. Eating wisely, but it's not just about the food, but also the environment around the food. And it's also about connection. So think mental well-being, finding our tribe, finding our people we feel most loved and connected with, and having our belonging. So Blue Zones, this is a better depiction of their Blue Zones project, of their Power Nine, or their nine key values. So we'll touch a lot, of course, on these, especially in the movement and nutrition sections. Their nutrition profile that we love about a Blue Zones diet is it's mostly plant-based, but it's not omitting meat per se, right? So we love that it's mostly plant-based and that it's rich in fruits, vegetables, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds, and whole grains. So that's a common tenet you'll see in any healthy diet, right? Any anti-inflammatory diet that you see. Go wholly whole, it says on the bottom of that graphic, because now we're taking it to this level of it's not just is it enough protein, carbs, or fat, but is it meaning like a whole food ingredient? Is it minimally processed, or does it have, 20 different ingredients, half of which I can't, pronounce? So it's about kind of getting back to a more simplistic way of eating and living, more like raw foods as tolerated, not raw meat though, of course, cooked, ground, or fermented often are other preparation methods. So think of like fermented, like pickled beets or pickle old onions to add to salads, for example, and not highly processed. As you go further up with Blue Zones, they do ask for about a half a cup to 1 cup of beans per day. And this is a really easy way to get your fiber up. So I do often like recommending this just as a general tenet in practice, because about a cup of beans is 15 grams of fiber. So you're already getting ahead. For women, you need about 28 grams of fiber per day, men at least like 35, 36 grams per day. So if you're getting an extra 15 in there just from that cup of beans, it can really pole vault you forward, which getting that fiber is linked for heart health, blood sugar health, gut health, you name it. Of course, with the Blue Zones diet, it's going to be minimally processed. So we're focusing a lot on water as our main beverage, coffee, tea especially is a great option. Tea is a part of the Mind diet as well. So it's actually very good for cognition over time due to the polyphenols and the flavonoids in the wine, in the tea. And then Blue Zones does connote wine as a part of their program. We have a slide on that later in the presentation we'll get to. So take that with an asterisk, but always alcohol anytime you see that. Less is best. Snacks on nuts, right? So about 1 to 2 handfuls a day. I think that's a good idea, that why they're putting that out there, but I would recommend maybe, a few ounces a day, maybe 2 ounces, 1 to 2 times a day. For many of us, that could be a lot of extra calories. So it does, you do want to factor your own personal needs, or if you can even have nuts, right? Like you might have some different digestive discomforts or things going on. Go easy on fish. So, of course, just like a Mediterranean diet, the Blue Zones diet is going to recommend a lot of seafood. They're actually much more specific than the Mediterranean diet. Mediterranean diet's like at least twice a week, where Blue Zones is fewer than 3 ounces up to 3 times weekly. So they really want to push seafood just a little bit more. So see it as a way of like building upon a Mediterranean diet. Go eliminate eggs. So I'm it's not I'm not ever very much a fan of black and white language when it comes to nutrition. So when you see eliminate, it's saying underneath it no more than 3 per week, right? Where this is where I would also take it with an asterisk that it's all about the quality of your eggs. So if you're getting, pasture raised organic eggs, if you can find it in the store, right? Or egg whites, those you can have much more frequently. And honestly, there isn't a lot of validity to the 3 per week concept. It really depends on your unique heart health and what your body can tolerate in terms of certain fats and saturated fats. But as a general guide, 3 a week can be a stringent one to go towards, but might not be the best guidance for all. And no, it does not count egg whites. Slash sugar. So of course we always want to keep sugar low. Sugar feeds inflammation, affects heart disease, including our cholesterol, believe it or not, risk for diabetes, cancer, and other inflammatory conditions similar to even arthritis. We want to reduce dairy as a part of a Blue Zones diet. And of course, it's due to the fact that in nature, many people don't tend to consume milk in a lot of other countries after childhood. So, of course, milk saying reduce, not eliminate, meaning, yogurt, cottage cheese, kefir as like a fermented source and a source of calcium. but being careful with like the frequency of cheese, or the portioning of cheese or milk or ice creams or other processed dairies. Looking for organic grass-fed when possible. And then retreat from meat. So this is also, believe it or not, similar to the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet sees meat as like a garnish, but distinguishing similar to blue zones, meat is different from fish. So sometimes when we say meat, we also include fish, like just thinking like animal protein. But in this case, meat is considered something different from seafood. When it comes to meat, it's saying retreat from meat. Blue zone centenarians eat about 2 ounces or less about 5 times per month. So you could see it as 1 to 2 times per month, I mean, per week having red meat, which is the general guidelines to reduce risk for colon cancer. And also red meat, aim for grass fed if you can. That's going to make it a much better, more natural product, similar to these old world traditional diets. Of course, in here that you don't see on this Blue Zones guidelines cheat sheet on the left, it mentions local, seasonal, and minimally packaged foods, right? So we'll go a little more into that. Blue Zones is also building upon past habits that we've been working on together, and that you'll see that they also abide by like a MyPlate premise, that USDA MyPlate, which is right here on this right-hand side of the screen, where about half the plate is fruits and non-starchy vegetables. So think breakfast fruit or snack fruit or dessert fruit, but what's it called? The proteins. I'm so sorry. I live in an apartment and they're vacuuming upstairs, so I'm just going to send them a message to kindly not vacuum during the presentation, just if you guys are picking up on that. Just want to get that's a step.
It's pretty quiet. Don't worry about it.
Not bad. All right. Okay. Thank you. I'm hearing it, so I was like nervous you guys are hearing it. It's getting picked up, but as long as you guys don't hear it, that's fine. Um, so okay, 50% of the plate, fruits or vegetables. Think fruits in the morning. Always have a plant at every meal, right? So fruit at breakfast, vegetable at lunch, vegetable at dinner is a good way to see it. About half your plate, or about like two fists, is a good like quick hand way of seeing this. But something is better than nothing. So some individuals, they might be seeing this and say, oh my gosh, I have a vegetable like once a day. So if we start with like 1/4 of the plate of vegetable and get really consistent with that and then build up to 50%, that could be a good way to see that. The other fourth is going to be the whole grains, but that's also where your beans can fall. That's also where your starchy vegetables can fall, like peas, corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, and most squash, except for spaghetti squash, zucchini, and summer squash. Those guys are just quirky in that they're non-starchy and you can eat as much as you want as long as it doesn't bother your belly. Because they're very non-caloric. And then the protein. So protein is going to be mostly like an animal product or like a tofu or like an edamame, which is also soy, goes in that 1/4 your plate. So I'm still an advocate of making that like a lean animal protein. It's just if you're getting more proteins from say like beans or like your starches, quinoa, it adds a little extra oomph to your meal aside from just the protein that's coming from the animal aspect of it, if that makes sense. Um, Something that's very blue zones oriented that can be a little rigid, that everyone's athletics are different, everyone's medical needs are a little different. So they do have their general guideline of 95% is plant-based, which is great. I do think that's a little high, like maybe 80 to 90% plant-based, just because if you are lifting weights and really trying to promote a high protein intake, um, typically 95 isn't going to cut it, to be as to be very honest, in terms of getting enough of that protein. um and here it's saying like 65% carbs, 20% fats, and 15% proteins, like making up the diet. That's relatively very old school to have that. So that's where in presenting this, I do disagree with blue zones, and I would nudge my own patients a little differently. That if someone's a diabetic, right, you're gonna probably bring your carbs somewhere between 40, and if you're a diabetic that happens to like run and do a lot of cardio, upwards to about 55%. We're not going really to 65. If you're someone who's a marathoner though, and you have like a long training day, you're going to want your carbs upwards to 65%. So I would follow more of a plate method versus that percent method and adjusting those percents based on your one-on-one needs with a dietitian. In general, though, if your goals are to build muscle and keep body fat lower and you're a generally healthy, average adult, exercising, a few days a week, doing a mixture of cardio and strength training, typically you'd see protein about 20 to upwards 35%. Fats typically around 30%. You don't really go higher than 35%. You don't really go lower than 25% with fat. And then carbs to make up the rest to add up to 100. But that's very, very specific to the individual. So blue zones is really good if you're one of those individuals who needs like more stringent guidelines. So sometimes it's good to pop into blue zones just to kind of like get oneself like on track for like a month or so and then, maintaining those habits. So they do have a little more rigidity with their 4 always foods and their 4 avoid foods. So of course it's all about balance, and in general it's like going into it with a healthy mindset. So for the always foods, of course, like you want to always kind of have whole grains if they agree with your body, right? Nuts are great, beans are great, fruits and vegetables are great. Um, they do have 5 to 10 servings per day as a goal for the vegetables. So like a big salad in your day, or starting your day with your meal with a side salad. We'll get into a volumetrics premise. This helps you to feel really full off low calorie foods as well, and keeps a lot of phytonutrients in your body and micronutrients in your body. So you're getting more nutrition essentially from your food versus having to supplement. But in terms of the avoid, right? They're very rigid. They're very much like black and white terms. I don't want to say 100% avoid, but maybe if you're doing this for like a 1 month, I just want to really kickstart something. I'm trying to just be a little strict with myself right now. And then, I know that this food is not a forever never have food. I'm just trying to really reduce it as much as possible. So like sugar sweetened beverages, that's one of those foods. Like soda is a food that just takes from you. There's no really benefit that we get from, say, like a soda or sugar sweetened beverages, like an energy drink. Like, yeah, it gives us some hydration, but for the most part, a lot of it's pretty dehydrating. So sugar sweetened beverages is keep it as low as humanly possible. Salty snacks, though, right? I feel like that is very broad. So if you were snacking on like a little bit of olives, right? Or if you were snacking on a cowboy caviar, which is like some beans with maybe a little lemon or lime juice and a pinch of some Himalayan sea salt or Celtic sea salt with some avocado, and then you take some siete chips. Like that's a saltier swap. Like that's a better option. But what they mean by salty snacks are more like think like Doritos, Cheez-Its, very preserved, um, artificial salty options. Too much cheese. Packaged sweets, of course, we want to keep that as low as humanly possible. If we really want a sweet, let's bake it. Let's make it from home, or do a healthier swap. And then processed meats. So, like we were saying with the red meat recommendation, so the reason why the US has adopted red meat 2 times a week or less comes from the increased rates of colon cancer that we're starting to see in this country. And a lot of it is because of our gut microbiomes are getting very altered because we're no longer really following these like more traditional diets. And we've augmented our environment so much, so fast, in such a way our body can't evolve to keep up to extrapolate nutrition from a lot of these really processed foods. You're seeing a lot of issues go on in the gut for people. So if we're starting to have less processed foods, less processed meats, but more so that emphasis on fiber, which feeds our gut, adds variety to that microbiome, that also helps to reduce risk for cancer and heart disease as well. So it's take things with a grain of salt, but in general, sugar sweetened beverages, really try to avoid like the plague. Salty snacks, you you have a good sense of what's right or wrong, but if we're ever uncertain, please, you could always shoot us a message. Would this be acceptable? And a salt number, just to note, to be considered low sodium, it's 160 and below milligrams per on the food label. But then if it's like a moderate salt food, really about like 300 and below. So your daily needs for salt, if you have no comorbid conditions, is about 2,000 and 2,300 milligrams of salt per day, or about a couple teaspoons. And if you eat minimally processed, though, you're really just getting your salt from maybe like cheese or like grains. A lot of it does come from eating out, baked goods, processed foods for many. 11% comes from the salt shaker in the average American diet. So the Mediterranean diet pyramid is here depicted. I just wanted to share it because it is very similar to Blue Zones, and I kind of wanted to take Blue Zones and really emphasize what are these like true traditional diets. Like I grew up, my last name is Reichart, which means I come from a family of German butchers, hence why I have a Rottweiler. We've been bonded for generations. And then I come from a family of Sicilian fishermen, right? So I always like to ask my family, like, what were the foods that were really prominent and things. And it is mostly plant-based foods. I think about a lot of these cultures are very agrarian, agriculturally based, like Okinawa, Japan. So that's why you're really seeing this base be be plants. Consider like an herb garden, the part why we wanted to have this talk this time of year, because now we're getting into gardening season and Hicks just finished their beautiful garden show. So this is a great way to get more plants in your diet. For many of you who have done different presentations with us, this can be a little redundant, but I never want to miss something if someone hasn't seen it. So of course, like in a Mediterranean diet, it's a very carb-rich diet. As you saw, it's 65% carbs. That's a very high carb diet compared to many other ones that you guys have seen. And I'm not saying jump your carbs up to 65%, but just to note the quality of the carbs that is being recommended. So think of like inflammation. Blue burns hotter, right, than yellow, and then red actually doesn't burns like the least hot. So it's the color of heat essentially. So the least inflammatory carbs are like your fruits, your vegetables, your whole grains, your beans, your truly plants. As they get more and more processed though, so now think like more minimally processed, like think like breads and pastas, even if it's homemade bread, that's still processing to get to that point, right? So whenever there's processing when it comes to carbs, fiber and like water soluble nutrients tend to really be broken down. And then on the outside, of course, you see like your soda, energy drinks, pastries, sweetened acai bowls, like more of those processed refined carbs. The other way to depict this is the high fiber to low fiber carbohydrate choice continuum, where on the left, of course, is going to be what's called like a complex carb. It's called complex, not just because, okay, I was going to make another joke. It's called complex because it has fiber, right? And then it's made simplified through processing the other end, simple sugars, when the fiber gets reduced. So carbs, like being fruits and vegetables, they're great because of that fiber. It mitigates the blood sugar spike, especially when you pair with protein or healthy fat. So the sugars don't really spike in our blood as high as it would if we had refined or white carbs. Fiber is the cornerstone of a healthy diet. There's a lot of healthy diets out there, right? Mediterranean diet, African diet, Asian diet, Blue Zones diet, anti-inflammatory diet, Mind diet. They're all very similar. What make Dash diet, right? Like what brings all of these together? A lot of the time it's often fiber. So I hate to say it, we're not escaping our fruits and vegetables. We want to try to find ways to like and truly enjoy them. Um, and of course, note that having this fiber in our body, it takes up space, it makes us feel full, it can slow down digestion. Certain fibers help to speed up digestion to help reduce risk for constipation, but also reduce risk for diarrhea. Our body doesn't break down fiber, it's considered relatively calorie-less. The bugs in our gut actually break down and eat the fiber. So you're feeding your gut when you eat fiber. So you're going to help more beneficial bacteria take up space, take up surface area in that colon, that large intestine. And because they're taking up space, well, guess what? Those bad bacteria that like to eat the red meat and cause inflammation and cause cancer and other digestive issues, there's no space for them at the table. They're going to have to pass through. So increasing your fiber is another way to help really support gut well-being. Part of a Mediterranean diet is eating the rainbow. So we had recently offered a phytonutrients presentation where we can go for hours on just this cheat sheet alone. But I wanted to highlight that the food in our food is for a reason, right? So that food creates these pigments, which are essentially called phytonutrients or phytochemicals. It's a synonym term, means the exact same thing. Chemical just sounds scarier than nutrient. It's like dietitian, nutritionist. Dietitian's legit, nutritionist not as much, but nutritionist doesn't sounds more legit than dietitian. So it's one of those nomenclature things. So with phytonutrients, those plants create that pigment to draw in an insect to help with, say, pollination or to repel pests, for whatever needs. When we ingest a lot of those phytonutrients, some are really good for us, some are not. Um, Red, for example, in tomatoes is a lycopene, which is really good for our heart. So when you hear people say like eat the rainbow or eat in season, eat locally, eat bountifully, it's because when you're eating local in season colorful produce, you're going to get more vitamins and minerals versus if it's out of season or had to travel all the way over from California in the middle of the winter, and then be stored for months on end, that by the time you get that produce, for example, like berries in the winter, if it's not flash frozen, they could be degraded up to 50% of that value. So really knowing how to pick your produce, like the old school Produce Pete on CBS, he's got his own website. He's got videos on how to pick any kind of piece of produce. Looking at your fruits and vegetables and your meat before you buy it can really tell you a lot about the nutritional value. Um, of course, fruits and vegetables, keep them in sight and in mind, snack on them, have them cut and pre-prepped in the fridge. Sometimes I store them with just a little bit of water, for example, carrots, just to keep some moisture in them. Explore the produce aisle. I love getting lost at the grocery store. If even if I'm doing an online order, sometimes, it's like saying, okay, I want to try one new thing, one new fruit this season or this month coming in, or I want to try one new vegetable if I'm more, limited. Add them to meals, get frozen. Frozen is not the devil, especially double check your ingredients. If it's just flash frozen fruits or vegetables, no other sauces and um, salts or sugars, things added, that's fine. Most of the frozen produce is great. If it's out of season, it sometimes has more nutrients in it versus the fresh that's out of season being sold. And then with seasonality, this is just a pretty image, but there's the seasonal food guide.org. I'm trying to press it. I'm going to bring it up here this way instead. Oh, no. Seasonal food guide. Escape. I'm going to send it actually versus doing this whole share and get off and then get back on. Let's see if it works. Seasonal food guide. So this tells you more like nationally, which I think tends to make more sense with what you see coming in from into New York. So it's saying like, okay, this is in season in New York, in nationally, and you're getting it in New York in season. So I feel like it's a little more accurate, this guide. Um, so if you go to any month, so say today I want to hit early March. So are you guys seeing this shared on your screen by any chance? Just want to make sure it's going through. I'm not the best with
Yes,
technology.
we are.
Yes, we are.
Thank you guys. You rock. So you guys know I'm not the best with tech. So it's divided into half months, which is really nice. So you can click like early March. I don't want to hit Texas. I'm going to hit early March, New York, and it's going to show me what's, coming up for this month here. You could change it up just to be like, when are apples in season? Or, when is broccoli in season? You could do that. And it'll pop up right here. So it's a good quick tool. New York State actually has their own resource as well. I'll put in the email too. And also Sangli is their website. They're a CSA we like to partner with, and I believe they're still accepting new signups for the summer produce. That if you want to get fresh, local, in-season produce and not really have to think much about it, it gets delivered once a week. You could sign up for Sangli's on their website, and I can put that in the email I send out as well. So I'm going to go back to sharing the screen for the presentation. Let's see. Share. Okay. Back into the presentation. Okay. And then present. Beautiful. Present. There we go. Okay. Now we're back up. So eating in season, that's part of Blue Zones because they didn't really have access like we do now. So thinking back to like how you ate what you had around you in your local, 25 to 50 mile radius, and that's really what you have access to. So that's where they're kind of pulling that from with blue zones. A lot of these cultures come from warmer climates, however. Volumetrics, I briefly touched on this. So that's part of the high fruit and vegetable volume in this diet is they incorporate a lot of volumetrics. So if you were to watch the documentary on Netflix, which is available, and I'll also share that, in Okinawa, Japan, for example, they eat these big stir fries filled with, lots of lean chicken, but just lots of vegetables. And they look like these big, huge, immense bowls. But when you break down the calories, it's like 300, 400 calories. And you're walking away feeling really full and satisfied because one, it takes time to eat that, right? It's a big portion, so it's really filling in the gut. But what's great is it's loaded in fiber and water, so it's going to take up space, make you feel full, but really not taking a lot, and you're going to feel more physically satisfied. So I like that image on the side to convey like volumetrics. Volumetric foods are not just, fruits and vegetables. It could be broths like bone broth. Beans and legumes do also count somewhat in that category. But denser foods, say like nuts, do not fall in volumetrics. Lean proteins like chicken, especially very lean ground turkey, egg whites are very good volumetric foods. So I also provided a list here for you guys. Think like old school full course meals, right? Getting that little salad before a meal. Think when you go to like a sushi restaurant and you get the salad and then the miso soup or whichever order. And it's not very robust with like a very creamy, thick, dense dressing. It's like a little like herb and spice, like ginger dressing. But you're starting to feel really full off that. And really, how much is in that little salad and that miso soup? Probably max 100 calories at the absolute most. Between the two of them, I would say 100, 150 calories. So that's a great thing to consider even just before your meals at home, especially if you catch yourself like eating quickly and then the portion increases. Of course, focusing on the timing, but playing around with volume foods can also help with that. So protein is a big part of the Blue Zones diet. So where Blue Zones differs a little bit from us, we're a little bit more meat and fish oriented. But that's okay. Everyone's different. It's finding what works for you. So with the Blue Zones, we like to, in general, say if you're following about 15 to 35% of your diet coming from protein, that wide range, you're going to fall somewhere between 20 and 35 grams of protein per meal, which is roughly about 3 to 5 ounces. So about your palm to your hand size of a protein in a snack. You don't have to have protein in a snack, but it's a really good way to keep full and reach your numbers for the day of your total protein. The average woman needs at least about 100 grams, men about 150. Um, Aim for 7 to 20 grams in a snack, right? Beans can really help to bolster that up. A tuna salad, right? With some whole grain crackers, that's very blue zone. The general population, when you look up protein needs, like, and you compare it to like the bodybuilder's gram per pound, and then the old school USDA 0.8 grams per kilogram body weight, it's very confusing for somebody, right? To say what's right. One is completely higher compared to the national RDA. The RDA stands for recommended daily allowance. So the reason why that's so low is that's considered your minimum that you really need to not have protein malnutrition. So in general, an RDA should never be like what we really aspire to. We want to try to hit that and then some, right? So that's our minimum. So now a lot more literature has been coming out on protein in the past 5 to 10 years that the average person trying to, strength train and focus on mobility and maintaining their muscle with age is about like 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram body weight. So you just do your weight divided by 2.2, and then you multiply that. If you weight train like say 5, 6 days a week, which is a little crazy, you multiply that by 1.6, maybe a little higher. If you strength train maybe once, twice a week max, and you're really just trying to preserve your muscle tissue, you don't really want to gain much, 1.2. But that's really meet with a dietitian one-on-one because there's a lot of medical factors that go into that too. Um, and note 1 pound is 2.2 kilograms. More is not always better because sometimes it's calories. So for some, if we're eating lots and lots of red meat just to get our protein up, well, there's a lot of saturated fat that comes with that. So we got to think protein sometimes comes with other things. And more is not always better in that it is very rare to stress your kidneys, but if someone's eating only protein, like say a carnivore diet, um, you can really augment your microbiome because they're just eating a ton of protein, no fiber. Protein make 1/4 of your plate. Typically in the Americanized style of eating, it's a half plate. So that's also why Blue Zones and Mediterranean diet are saying make it a garnish, make it 1/4 your plate. That's where that comes from. And that's what we typically counsel towards anyhow. And it's all about, of course, quality is most important when it comes to your protein. Here it says like your total amount of protein is the first thing. You got to hit your total needs for the day, and then worry about spreading it out throughout the day, worry about the quality of it and the timing. That's typically the order to go in. But first, just try to hit the right amount and then try to spread it out throughout the day as needed. Herbs and spices are a large part of a Mediterranean and a Blue Zones diet because even though they're tiny, they are mighty. They contain a lot of antioxidants that are also very anti-inflammatory. They can be anti-tumorigenic, which is also anti-carcinogenic. They also can have effects for blood sugar health. So think of your herbs and spices like berberine and cinnamon, for example, that could be helpful for lowering glucose. Favorable effects for cognition and mood. So that's a big aspect of the mind diet are these like herbs and spices and like these teas. So adding them also helps because it competes with salt and sugar. So if I'm adding cinnamon or nutmeg or pumpkin pie spice to my oatmeal in the morning with a little vanilla protein powder, and some fruit, having those flavors in there from the vanilla protein powder and the fresh herbs and spices might make me less likely to add too much honey or sugar or something else, for example. So think of it as if that's there, I'm less likely to add more problematic things potentially. There's bioactive constituents in there, which just noting that bioactive constituents meaning phytonutrients that will help your body with different uh, physiological needs to combat metabolic stress or aging or other comorbidities. Part of a Mediterranean or a Blue Zone diet is this concept of sofrito, which is below. There's a little recipe there. Sofrito can be different in a bunch of different cultures between Spain, Portugal, Italy, South America. Different cultures have different types of sofrito. So the one that you're seeing below might be a little different from the one that you might know. Think of sofrito kind of like salsa in that it's like a little accoutrement that packs a lot of phytonutrients. So look, there's garlic, there's onions, there's peppers, leeks, tomato paste, extra virgin olive oil. So you're getting a lot of plants, a lot of vitamins, minerals. You could add that as a topping on a salad. You can add that as a topping for meat. You could have it with a little bit of chips as like a salsa. You could add it with eggs. So in these cultures, typically you would make like a sofrito like for the week, or think now a more Americanized way is like the Italian Sunday sauce. Like you make a big sauce for the week or you make a big sofrito for the week, and then you could add it to things to add a little bit boost of flavor. Pico de gallo is kind of similar. Bruschetta is kind of similar. So they're just good tools to think about. So these are just some good animal-based proteins to note. Cottage cheese especially is almost double the amount of protein as a yogurt when you think about it, almost. But I wanted to highlight animal-based proteins with an example of how much protein in their serving, just so that you guys have this to reflect upon with the slides. And then, of course, the plant-based proteins. So note, like, they're not your stars of the plate. Maybe tofu if you have it, right? Or veggie burger, a couple meals that you'll have that, right? That's the star of your plate when you have those. But the rest of these guys, like unsalted nuts, nut butter, lentils, edamame, pumpkin seeds. Like we're not going to count that like the meat on our plate, if that makes sense. It's going to be added. So if I want to add pumpkin seeds to my smoothie and I already have some Greek yogurt in there or some cottage cheese in there, that's great because now I'm getting some plant-based protein and some animal-based protein. There's like a documentary also on Netflix that pits plant-based eating against animal-based eating. And the answer is never to like cut out one side and only go to the other. We know in life things are yin and yang. So it's about having a healthy balance of plant-based and animal-based. But animal-based gets such a bad rep, but it's where it comes from. If my meat is coming from a very stressful feedlot situation, not really fed well, sad situation, that nutritional quality is not as good. And believe it or not, even the cortisol of the animal, they're looking to start to have that incorporated in meat, it could affect the meat, if it's grass fed, how long it's grass fed, were they pasture raised or they organic. It can impact the nutritional quality of the meat greatly. So we're thinking old ways when it comes to that. And of course, when it comes to seafood, there is different seasonality that we'll get to in that right now this time of year, I think like bluefish is really big. You really just use bluefish as like a bait fish though. Some people use it in soups. But like in the fall, for example, bass is really in season on Long Island. Oysters are in season often, except months that end in brary, like January, February, for example. You typically around June, you see a lot of salmon start to come into season. So similar to produce, there is a seasonality with seafood too. The Monterey Bay Association, based in California, have a lot of amazing, credible resources if you're really interested in that. And Norway, if you're interested in sustainable seafood, and Faroe Island, Norway and Faroe Island, if you're interested in farm raised, but in the ocean, pod raised, sustainable seafood that also is high in omega-3s and not artificially dyed, like the on land farm raised fish, you could look to Faroe Island and Norway as well. So it's all about the quality. Part of Blue Zones, though, where it gets a little deeper than just the Mediterranean diet, is there's a little bit more of a distinction around environment, like more of these tips. So they have their 80% rule. So to stop eating when we're about 80% full. So usually start that first feeling of fullness. Let yourself wait and digest, and then say, all right, am I still hungry? Do I need anything else? Can I just sip my drink a little bit at the table? Okay, I'm full. I'm good. I don't need the rest. So it's just a lot of it's about like going really slow. So if I know I go a long time without eating and then I start eating really quickly, forget about it. I'm not going to leave anything on the plate. Um, and it's also escaping this whole concept of the plate tells me I'm full versus my body telling me I'm full. And a lot of us, we've all probably seen the Noom commercial. We've been conditioned since kids, finish your plate. But let your body guide the way, essentially. The plant slant, if you haven't gotten the message, it's a very plant-based diet. So that's where that mantra comes from with them is the plant slant. It's just it's eat meat is smaller amounts, 1/4. The plants, of course, the fats are going to be anti-inflammatory fats that typically come from plants or very minimally processed meats. So trans fats we stay away from as much as possible. Thank God it's not really very prevalent in the food supply ever since Congress declared war back in the early 2000s. Because a lot of trans fats are artificially made. Saturated fats can occur naturally in nature, but also chemically. So saturated fats get a weird little asterisk. So just to start, in general, saturated fats can come from more like processed foods, think out of a bag or a box, Cheez-Its, Lay's, Hostess, Entenmann's, those kind of foods, but also French fries, foods out to eat, high fat animal meats, animal products. Now, if it's 10% on the label, right? Typically if it's that's like a good guideline. So we'll say 5 is fine, 20 is plenty as it applies to the percent daily values that go down the nutrition facts label. So if you see saturated fat and it's closer to 20%, you're like, yikes, that's like 20% of what I'm allotted for the day. That's plenty. 20 is plenty. If it's closer to 5%, 5 is fine. Um, if you're someone who sees it more in grams than percentages, less than about 2 to 3 servings or 2 to 3 grams per serving is a good rule of thumb. Uh, the types of saturated fats, though, matter. Is it coming from like a processed meat or a feedlot meat? Is it coming from a grass-fed butter or is it coming from a margarine, right? We want to stay far away from margarine. Grass-fed butter is okay, like a Kerrygold butter is one of the better ones. So just be mindful of where your saturated fats are coming from. Coconut oil, I still recommend using caution. Your main oil should be like an olive oil, especially from a Blue Zones or a Mediterranean standpoint, anti-inflammatory standpoint. And for higher heat cooking, avocado oil is ideal. Coconut is like for those one-off occasions when the other two don't really fit and you're like baking or you need to melt a little chocolate that you just use it conservatively. But just note it's solid at room temperature. So I'm just providing a visual. When fats are solid at room temperature, they're either a saturated or a trans fat, or they're spoiled. So when you see coconut oil, that is truly solid at room temperature if it's, not too hot. So it's truly a saturated fat. And then picture that in your bloodstream. Um, so just helps to kind of tie it together. Good fats, I don't like saying good and bad, but your better fats, right? Are your monounsaturated and your polyunsaturated fat. Omega-3s fall into that category. So notice there's saturated and unsaturated. They do not have to put unsaturated or polyunsaturated on the label. If they do that, they're kind of just being nice and spending their own money just cause. So sometimes you do see that under total fat, but often like this label here on the right of the slide, you don't see any mono or polyunsaturated fat in the fat category. It's just total fat, saturated fat, and trans fats. So if I want to know how much is coming from these better fats, I would say, okay, there's 8 grams of fat in this, 2/3 cup serving. If I subtract 1 gram from that, there's about 7 grams potentially coming from a healthier fat. But even with that, I would just, run through the ingredients on the label. If you see any hydrogenated oils, vegetable oils, seed oils, um, it's something just to factor and try to stay away from to the best of your abilities, not in your like day-to-day foods or your top 20 foods that you tend to eat. Olive oil is rich in a lot of antioxidants, so that's why it's touted as, your mother oil, your main oil. Cold pressed is great for preserving those antioxidants. Essentially, virgin olive oil or extra virgin, I should say, is for no heating. Virgin, you could heat up to about 375, 400 is about the smoke point. Canola, even though it's written here as like a better fat, it is, but the way it gets processed in this country is what makes it a not great oil to use. So that's also what's very confusing is on its own, if it was processed better, it wouldn't be as bad, but it's the way it's processed that adds a lot more hydrogenation to it. High oleic sunflower oil you might see, or high oleic sesame oil you might see. Those are a little better. Use those as like your finishing oil, or you're trying to have a different cultural flair, but it's not your main oil. It's really olive oil or avocado. Really, it's olive. Polyunsaturated fats. So that's of course more of like your nuts and seeds. Of course, I'm going to recommend a lot of flax seeds for you guys. There's a lot of plant-based omega-3s in there too. Walnuts are poly and monounsaturated. So again, just eat a variety of foods, right? Just try to make these your better fats when you can. Fats make you feel full too, so they are a part of that puzzle of having a little fat, a little protein, and a little carb at every meal. Omega-3s, if you do not eat fatty fish, unfortunately, my friend, you might need to supplement omega-3s into your diet. Yes, you can get it from vegetarian sources like algae, eggs, especially if they're pasture raised organic, flaxseed oil, chia seeds, but depending on your genetic SNPs, it's very likely you'd have to eat a lot of it, almost like pounds of it, to get enough of your omega-3s in for the day. So typically, fatty fish have what's called DHA and EPA fats, where vegetarian sources have more what's called ALA, omega-3 fats. All three are great, it's just ALA doesn't convert as readily. So typically, if you want to have omega-3s in your diet naturally, you really want to eat fatty fish, at least a 3-ounce serving, 2 to 3 times a week. I know this sounds like one of those funny nutrition things, like if this, not that kind of situation, but have fatty fish 2 to 3 times a week. Really don't try to go above it because there is that risk for mercury poisoning. The smaller the mouth of the fish, like a sardine, an anchovy, think Sicily, they cook a lot with anchovies over there. You're going to get a lot more omega-3s with those, well, a similar amount of omega-3s to like the tuna or salmon. But because they have a smaller mouth, they're not alive as long, their fatty tissue isn't as big, they're not picking up as much of those heavy metals. But yeah, it's good to have a variety of these foods. Have some edamame, but also have your tuna. This is just another visual. If you like visuals, there's going to be a cheat sheet associated at the end with all the visuals put together of that anti-inflammatory diet. This I'm not going to go as in depth, but this just puts the specific antioxidants into the picture when it comes to olive oil. I also really like it because it has 2 seals on it that are really good to look for in your oils. The olive oil industry, though, is a little cryptic. So there are a couple of other brands I could put out there. I do really like the California olive. Olive oil, there's a couple. I just got another really nice one, something with a P. It comes from Sicily, but typically Crete, in Greece, has very good high quality olive oil that if you see Crete, it's typically a good location that you're getting your olive oil from. I'm Sicilian. I shouldn't be promoting Greek olive oil. I'm kidding. Um, and then anything else I want to, oh, another big trend people are doing is taking shots of olive oil. I'm not against it. It is a little acidic, especially if you get really high quality olive oil. It's in cold press, it's going to be more acidic. So keep that in mind if you have a sensitive esophagus and acid reflux. But really, if you think about it, a tablespoon's about 100 calories. I'd rather cook with it. Why am I just going to add 100 extra calories to my day and not have it really be a part of a meal? So really try to cook with it. I mean, some people use it as a shot now if they don't drink to have that instead of a shot. Okay, it's better than alcohol, similar calories, but at the end of the day, it's just like cook with it, eat with it, use it as a dressing. Um, Sometimes it's just a little extra. Part of the blue zones also goes deeper in regard to finding one's purpose. I can never say it right. They're Ikigai and Plan de Vida. So they all kind of overlap, right? It's like what you love, your personal mission, your passion, what you're good at, right? What's the needs of the world? Is it professional or can you get paid for it? Not all of it has to be a job, right? Some people, their job is their passion. Like, I love nutrition. This is my passion. I could definitely say it falls into this category for me. For some others, though, like they might not really like their job, and that's okay. And they have another outlet outside. I like maybe there's some individuals like, okay, I do X, Y, and Z. I like it. It's not my life's purpose because when I get out, I have my family, or I go and volunteer, or I'm a part of my church, or I'd love to volunteer at the animal shelter or take care of the animals in my neighborhood. Whatever that be, it's tending to your heart and soul, but also this concept of the Seventh Day Adventists tend to get highlighted a lot in blue zones and different centenarian cultures. Um, for their spirituality, but also because of their volunteerism. It's that concept of when you're giving back and you're volunteering, evidence has shown that it does come back to us to help our health. So it's part of just being a part of your community. Think about that loneliness that a lot of us, or many of us, may have felt during COVID, of just being a little detached from our day-to-day activities, our gym, our community, our people, and how that kind of might have affected our well-being. That's kind of what Blue Zones is getting at, is being a member of the community in a productive, healthy, happy way that's good for you and the community. So in this program, when we do run the Blue Zones Challenge, we're working on getting a set date. It's going to be coming up, though. I'm going to be honest. I want to personally do it middle to end of April or beginning of May, but we'll see what's going on. We have to look at a couple other, factors as everything kind of works together. But and I know Christina wants to do it sooner too. Part of this, there's different quizzes that, with what you feel comfortable, because I know this taps on mental health and we're here for nutrition and overall well-being. But with Blue Zones in the beginning, they have like a finding your purpose quiz and just helps you to like kind of guide what you like, what you don't like, or what's working, what's not working, just so you can kind of find where you want to focus your energy. That is all a part of it, and you kind of can check in with it from time to time. So that will be a part of the challenge. But if this is an area that you really enjoy and you want to really talk about it with somebody, this is also really great for maybe mental health counseling, or a career advisor, or a close loved one. But I think it's good to talk about it just to find what that niche is for you if you don't have that already. And if you do have that already, it's about making time to do those things that make us fill our cup and feel good. Downshifting is a whole big part of it. In these cultures, they tend to move a little slower. So I know for us in New York, when people are moving a little slower, it makes us a little agitated, but we could, take a note from them. So it's all about downshifting. You'll see different things about like forest bathing, so going for walks in the woods, calmness, because we know if we're living this rat race lifestyle, over here on the right hand side, I'm showing that parasympathetic sympathetic nervous system, where when your body is producing more cortisol, that cortisol can suppress your thyroid hormones. So in being more stressed, you're also reducing thyroid functioning, can impact GI health, and it can impact your metabolic rate, impacts your blood sugars, can impact your blood pressure, a whole slew of things. So that's where Blue Zones is kind of, even though in a non-medical approach, it's getting at the whole concept of cortisol. So this concept of having a daily routine to shred stress, like add different things in your day at night when you're winding down to stretch, do yoga, maybe have like a little de-stressing zone in your home. I personally like to I have a little yoga mat with like a knockoff sheepskin rug. It's not even and it's very chill. You got your little what's it called? Salt lamp and little plants just to, meditate, do yoga or someplace outside, but having a space for you just to, chill out. Could be your workout space, but also your meditation space too. Or just an area in the yard or on your bed or, at the kitchen table just sitting down for a second if that's your spot. But have a spot is most important. Common practices in blue zones that help with downshifting is napping. I do have an older gentleman I do see who's in his 90s and he is very spry. And one thing Norman does is he takes a 20-minute nap every day. So that is, I've seen that in real life. So the napping, prayer, right? Spirituality, chalking your stress up to a higher being. Tea breaks for some can be helpful. Time with loved ones just to laugh and blow off steam. It is important. It can reduce inflammation, lower cortisol, and promote an emotional balance that your nervous system isn't always in hyperdrive, right? Consider adopting a ritual, sometimes for individuals who feel like their mind cannot slow down at night, especially with that ongoing to-do list. I really love to recommend, journaling so you can get those thoughts just off your brain. It's on another outlet. You're making it tangible too, because sometimes when I write things out or I hear myself aloud, I'm like, oh, it's not as much as it sounds, or oh, it's more manageable. Like it just becomes more tangible. So just to try that, or breath work, Wim Hof breathing can be a great technique, box breathing, but see what works for you. Part of the blue zones is creating your moi, which is like your tribe, your social group of people. So we're going to be talking a lot more about this during the blue zones challenge because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create our own moi. Um, the moi is like your common people that in the modern day world, think of it as like maybe that's your tribe that you like to go on your walk with, at lunch. That's your group of people at work that you love to walk with at lunch. Could be your friends in your neighborhood that you like to go for a walk with, or it could be your family members that you do a potluck once a week. But it's just having your routine relationships. It could just be part of your moi is, I have a friend, she's a playwright, and she meets with friends and they write once a week together. And she said it's the best experience and so de-stressing and so invigorating for her. Find what works for you. Um, for me, it's definitely working out. I love having a group to work out with. Even though I'm a personal trainer and I could write my own workouts, I love going to workout classes. And I used to talk to my fiance about this, like, why am I spending the money on workout classes? I teach them and I do it because I genuinely like that sport team feeling of being with each other, encouraging each other. We're not competing against each other, but we're working together. But see what works for you. These are just more about the similar concept. So finding belonging, finding tribe. You might find there's a group of individuals I had found recently that these ice baths are becoming a bigger way of bonding with different millennial groups. I'm noticing too. They actually had it in the news. There's a group I'll go to for it, and we do some breath work. Everyone's super encouraging. It feels like a party almost. Everyone's socializing. No one's drinking though. Everyone's either really into athletics, so you meet a lot of people that way. People are supporting each other going into the ice bath if it's safe for you with the instructors, making sure it's safe. And then there's hot tub or sauna that usually gets associated with these different types of groups run out of different gyms. And it's a way of connection because you're watching people, you're going into the ice, you're in a vulnerable position, right? So people are comforting each other, they're encouraging each other, they're cheering each other on. And then you have that big come down, that relax, that going into the hot tub, going into the sauna. Um, so that's just a new popular thing that's coming about, just if you might see that. But it could be going to your farmer's market, right? And like seeing similar people that you see each week at the farmer's market. It could be going to your local dog park, right? When I used to take Xena to the dog park, there would be those same handful of people I'd run into. Hey, Mark. Hey, Susan, how you doing? But those little interactions, they mean a lot more than I think we've realized. And I think many of us have come to that from the pandemic that, what does it take to say hi? And you never know what these small interactions, can turn into in our lives and how different people can touch people too. Um, but again, if you're someone that like getting out is a little difficult, people find that on social media. My father has a very specific medical condition that it's really hard for him to find other people with his condition. So he, found a Facebook group online, and they can all like talk to each other. Hey, when it does this, are you feeling this way? Or, how do you feel? And it just kind of makes you feel better. It depends on the person. But, there's power in community and friendship and positive peer pressure too. So, if you guys know me, and many of you do by now, know that I'm really not big when it comes to alcohol. I think it really just takes from the body. It doesn't really give much. But in terms of Blue Zones, I'm not a complete prude, meaning Blue Zones has this concept of wine at five. So in their program, they say the traditional like recommended daily allowance that the United States gives, if you could have 1 to 2 glasses per day, typically women one, men two. However, I do like to follow the literature more closely, and I like to be a realist. It is a carcinogen. So like I'm not playing around. Alcohol is carcinogen. I just don't think it's worth it. Um, I think the wine at five thing here is a cool idea, but it's maybe like, getting together for other ways of connecting with or with alcohol, with or without alcohol, right? I'm not saying never, right? Like once in a while, sure. Especially red wine. It is sugary, but it is um a better option because of the anthocyanin and the resveratrol in it. But I just think there's better ways to relax and deconstruct with friends. And I'm not very big in the wine culture stuff that you guys might see old school, like on the dishcloths. It's like, oh, don't talk to me until I have my wine. I'm like, that's a problem. Like those types of sayings. So, just keep mindful as well. I don't want to come off the wrong way that I'm like promoting certain things. I really do love mocktails. I went to a restaurant this weekend that did a really good job adding like Rhodelia to it, or ashwagandha to it, that you still felt that little uplift, but it was alcohol free. So keep your eyes out there. Or if you don't see a mocktail menu, you could always make it a mocktail and still be bonding with everybody, and no one knows what's in your cup anyway. So, there's all different ways to see it. The power of walking together. So that's all part of the Moi. When you're walking's also a very meditative action. Two, it's also a way I love to get people talking that I haven't talked to in a while, that I'm trying to like get them to open up a little bit. When you get them walking, you get them talking too. It gets people comfortable. So it strengthens social bonds. And there's also that accountability buddy concept, right? So if I know I have to meet someone at 5, I don't want to let them down. I don't want to leave them like, they plan their whole day. Now, if I'm gonna bail on them, that's not really cool. So it makes me more accountable to show up because of them and make it a ritual. So I've always found like doing things with friends, like whether from a fitness standpoint or just in general, if you make it too loose, it's never going to happen. If it's possible to be like Mondays at 5, we do this. Make it very specific so you don't have to text once a week. What time are we doing this? What works for you? Da 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 da. All this added extra like stimulus, messages on the phone. Try to make it a set ritual or appointment within the best of abilities for everyone's schedules. Sundays at 12, we go for a walk at Robert Moses, something like that. But change it up too. We live on Long Island, we live in a very beautiful place. So there's lots of great places to move naturally and things to do. So Blue Zones is a little little bit about ditching the gym membership. But if you ditch the gym membership and you're not as active, you gotta, something's better than nothing. But it's more about like getting outside, getting the red light, getting the vitamin D, getting the fresh air, walking, gardening, household tasks, more so like riding horses, thinking as well, right? Going for a run, chopping firewood, carrying that wood, lifting the groceries. I just think in modern day, the strength training is so, so important that if you're not getting really good strength training in your backyard, which I don't think most of us are doing that. We're not doing that crazy yard work. Some people are, you never know. That really, you might want to consider like an indoor outdoor home gym setup, or staying with the gym for your strength training, but getting outside more naturally for, hobbies and cardiovascular activity. Do what works best for you. Move naturally in terms of, now we're finally getting into springtime. It's that time of the year on Long Island that, there's more outdoor healthy activities we could do with friends, like going to Jones Beach and doing the ropes there, going for a walk, or going to a plant sale like Hicks. That's something I did recently with a friend, just to walk around Hicks and plant our gardens and, catch up, besides just going to a bar or restaurant or a movie and, being sedentary. This is also an area we'll go more in depth in the challenge, but setting up your home, right? There's psychological, there's physiological, and environmental influences of our food choices. So part of Blue Zones is creating that movement friendly space, like we were talking about, having like a spot in your home or outside for exercise. It's also could be serve as your de-stressing zone. So I just put a picture there I had found on the slide. Design a nourishing kitchen, like make it fun, right? Like I have like these little test tubes in my kitchen that have what's it called? Like pumpkin seeds, chia seeds in it, so it's out, it's accessible, it's in sight, but it's also, cute. It makes it look inviting that I want it, right? Have a fruit bowl out so it's insight in mind. I'm more likely to grab the fruit if it's out versus if it's tucked away. Have vegetables, pre-cut in your fridge. Just making the better foods more accessible and making the not so great foods either portioned, out of sight, out of mind, not as accessible. And of course, sometimes I like to recommend leave little mottos or mantras out in the house to, just give us little reminders during our day. And to keep us mindful. So diet and longevity. So what does the research show, right? So the Blue Zones diets are, even though it's mostly like a testimonial based diet, it's based in fact, if that makes sense. So it's plant-based, right? So it's high in fiber, antioxidants, anti-inflammatory compounds, low in added sugars and processed foods and animal fats. So we know that's good for us. Other benefits of following this kind of pattern of eating: reduced rates for cardiovascular disease, which is the #1 killer of all Americans; improved insulin sensitivity, which can impact cardiovascular disease, risk for diabetes, obesity, different shifts in mood, believe it or not, too. Um, Reduce risk for different cancers, right? Breast cancer, colon cancer, just different digestive cancers, especially, and longer telomeres. So telomeres are just part of our cells, and the longer it sounds weird, the longer they are, it kind of reminds me of that thread in Hercules. The longer they are, the longer our lifespan; the shorter they are, the more likely the shorter our lifespan. There's actually a Nobel Prize won in telomere research, like I think early what would you call the era of, like, I guess the late 2000s, before 2010 area. So I did put some peer-reviewed research in there just to show you guys. Um, as well, if you're looking for more, though, I could always send you some more options. Movement and purpose and mental health, right? That's another aspect that Blue Zones highlights that's good for our health. So this daily movement reduces risk for frailty and supports cognitive health, right? So a big reason why we want to strength train and keep our lean body mass up, our muscle or bone, is to reduce risk for, say, like hip fractures. Doing this can reduce mortality the mortality post hip fracture is 50% within a year. So it sounds funny, but that is a very scary statistic. So if you're focusing on your movement, you're reducing that risk. Focusing on our purpose has been linked with reduced risk of all cause mortality. Think of it as like a healthier mental health. It's also gets associated with downshifting. We know stress has a huge impact on our health and well-being, and it can actually lower inflammatory markers. Social connection and longevity, especially as we're getting older. We're seeing a loneliness epidemic in this country, unfortunately. Strong social ties reduce the risk for dementia, depression, and early death. So if you're like, I really want to cancel this plan tonight, I don't feel like going out, there's your incentive. All right. I get to see my loved ones, and you know what? I'm reducing risk for these different comorbid conditions. Shared meals, of course, right? Sharing meals is a cornerstone of a Mediterranean diet and part of a Blue Zones diet. It gives belonging, intergenerational support, passing down of values, mission, vision, ideals within generations, but also creates a little bit of peer pressure for kids in a positive way of, oh, mom and dad are eating the vegetables. That's just what they do. I mirror what my parents do, some kids, right? Or maybe eating at the table with friends. Oh, this friend is eating this vegetable. I don't want to, be at the table not eating the vegetable with their family. I'm going to eat that, right? Um, so sometimes it does bring about different peer pressure in the way of maybe some people have different foods and they're more apt to try it because someone else had it. So it's a good option to include. These are just some functional labs as we wrap up for longevity to consider. Of course, lab testing is a very individualized thing, of course, with a patient. But as a in general aside for longevity, testing your A1C, your fasting insulin, that tells you about your insulin sensitivity, insulin resistance, risk for diabetes. High sensitivity C-reactive protein tells you about your total body inflammation. And then if that's high, you try to narrow it down from there, where that inflammation is coming from with other markers. Zonulin is a marker that we offer in a couple of different tests here that you may also get covered by your provider too through blood work. Zonulin is this new measure that tells you a little bit about leaky gut. So it's becoming the leaky gut biomarker. So those pores that can open up in our GI tract, especially if we're not eating a lot of fiber or eating a lot of inflammatory foods, they open up and different pathogens, negative molecules can get absorbed and passed into the bloodstream and cause increased inflammation and wreak havoc in the body. So measuring your zonulin can be a great indicator of do I have a degree of leaky gut maybe going on? Again, leaky gut is not really the professional term. Increased gut permeability is the professional term, but everyone hears it in different ways. So I try to make sure everyone knows what I'm talking about. Homocysteine can tell you risk for heart disease, cardiovascular disease, also different genetic traits. Lipoprotein A and your calcium score could tell you a little bit more about the calcification of your arteries. Different vitamins and minerals have a large impact on aging well, especially vitamin D is always huge to touch on. Your metabolic and your CBC panels, you might scratch your head at first, like, what is that? But that's your basic blood work that like your primary runs. That's like your white blood count, that's like your liver functioning enzymes, that's like your different iron markers, your mean corpus volume, for example. It's a lot of your immune modulators as well. A lipid panel we mentioned, and then a DEXA scan or a high quality body composition. DEXA is great for telling you about your bone health as you get older, but can also tell you about visceral fat, muscle mass, body fat, similar to the high quality body composition scan. If you're more interested in blue zones beyond this presentation, good, because we have another challenge coming up, and I feel like that would be great to go off of this with a strong motivation into that. So keep your eyes out for our Instagram, the same way that you found out about tonight's seminar. Our Instagram, our email, notifications on Practice Better. Keep your eyes out. Netflix, the image below, Live to 100 Secrets of Blue Zones. If you really want to keep going tonight, you're like, I know what I'm going to watch tonight. It's available for free with subscription on Netflix, I should say. It's a multiple part mini series. It's wonderfully done. It's one of the few Netflix documentaries I like. And they have a whole campaign of different books out there. I have one of the cookbooks and I have the Blue Zones Challenge. So if you're really interested, I could always bring in one of those for you to flip through if you want, or to borrow. And just like anything though, I always say, like, what is this person trying to sell me, right? With a lot of Netflix documentaries. And the thing that I do like about Blue Zones is I do think it's like um how you say it's not that capitalistic in that, yes, they're gonna their main thing is they're trying to sell books, right? And they want to sell their TV series, and eventually they might try to make blue zone communities, like you would be a part of, okay, I'm getting my apartment or my house in this blue zone community, and it's kind of like a artificially made centenarian or blue zone area to encapsulate all these different values. So I think that's pretty cool. But whenever looking at different entities, like different, diets or what's it called, documentaries, I'm always just trying to follow the money, right? Anything with nutrition. So I always like to express that. But overall, I do think that this is a very sound, a balanced approach. If you're looking for something with a little bit more guidelines, a touch of rigidity, if that fits your mindset in a healthy way, Blue Zones could be an awesome, awesome thing to build into this year, especially. So some reflection. How can I add more Blue Zones habits to my life? Take a walk after meals, that reduces blood sugar spikes. You can walk with family too. Eat more beans and plants. Think, do I have a plant at every meal? Did I get my beans today? Share meals with friends and family, take pictures of your meals or share recipes, eat together, make it a talking point. And what a positive talking point that could be. Did you find this great cantaloupe? Oh my gosh, I found this awesome cantaloupe at the Uncle Giuseppe's over in Comac. Wow. Or did you see this awesome sale at the butcher, etc. But practice daily gratitude. Stress reduction is very important, especially part of a Blue Zones diet, living in New York. But yeah, these were each of the main domains that we went into today: diet, movement, home, relationship, lifestyle, and medical assessment. Key takeaways, though, is longevity can be influenced more by lifestyle than genetics. This picture kind of bothers me because I liked it a lot because there's not a lot that are similar images like this that you can find online. But really, the thing that's weighing it down the most is your lifestyle, not the genetics, right? I hate this expression, but I love this expression: is the genes load the gun, but the genes load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger, right? So you can actually turn on and turn off the expression of different nutrition related genes. Um, and in that, just because you have one gene linked with something, it's a matter of clusters of different genes equating to that trait. We can go more in depth with that. We also do offer different nutritional genetic testing now too, in one-on-one sessions. Blue zones promote natural movement, purpose, and stress reduction. We went into all of this. And of course, setting small habits can lead to long-term success. I know I went long tonight, guys, so thank you for bearing with me. It will also be sent out and recorded, so I know there was a lot of information there. So if you want to go back to anything, please, you are more than welcome to. This will be a YouTube video, so you'll see it on a YouTube playlist when it's sent. There's a whole bunch of other YouTube videos that we've made that come with it. So if you're interested and you want to just keep learning more, let us know. If you haven't booked one-on-one yet and you're interested in it, if we take your insurance for this seminar tonight, we likely can take your insurance for one-on-one counseling. And many people are often surprised that there's often no copay, which is amazing. That nutrition nowadays can have that. So give us a call or a text at that number on the screen. Email us. We're located inside Elevation Fitness at 41 John Street in Babylon. And just most importantly, thank you for your time tonight, guys. I went a little long and I do appreciate your attention as well. Does anyone have any questions?
I just wanted to thank you. It was a really great presentation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I like Blue Zones a lot. Can you tell?
Yeah.
Thank you.
What's not to like?
Right? It's very encompassing. I like it. It's not too rigid, but it gives us structure.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. But yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks, Amanda. It was great.
Enjoy your night, and I'll send you guys that email tonight, and eat something good.
Definitely. Thank you. Have a good night.
You
Bye.
too. Bye-bye.